We are back looking at New Answers book, lesson number 24, and the question they pose is this. Did dinosaurs turn into birds? I didn't know that was a question, but this book apparently does, and apparently this is something that's going on. It says in their introduction, according to many evolutionists today, dinosaurs are really not extinct, but rather are feeding at our bird feeders even as we speak. For many evolutionists, it would seem birds simply are dinosaurs. With this sort of bias, it is quite easy for evolutionists to find supposed evidence to support the notion that birds evolved from dinosaurs. First thing we want to look at is the origin of birds, okay? And as we often do, we're going to look at this from a biblical perspective and then from a evolutionist perspective, okay? So what the Bible says about the origin of birds is pretty clear, okay? It says, on day 5 of creation, God created every winged fowl after its kind. Look at Genesis 1, verse 20. Birds that flew above the earth. And then it says, day 6 of creation, God created man. And land animals, that would include your dinosaurs. So, birds on day 5, dinosaurs day 6. Birds are of many different kinds, the Bible says, okay? A kind refers to any group of animals capable of interbreeding and reproducing according to their type. The Bible tells us that there are many different kinds of birds. In Leviticus 11:13-19, it's the dietary laws of unclean birds and clean birds, which ones you could eat. So the Bible supports multiple created different bird kinds. Let's look at what the evolutionists say. They say that birds evolved from reptiles. Generally speaking, that's what they say. Came from reptiles. And so, as dinosaurs being a form of reptiles, they'll say birds evolved from dinosaurs. Thomas Huxley, we've talked about before, is the first to speculate this, that birds came from dinosaurs. And now it is the current popular view among almost all evolutionists that birds came from dinosaurs. There's some problems, though, with dinosaurs evolving into birds. First is warm-blooded versus cold-blooded, right? Dinosaurs and all reptiles are cold-blooded creatures. Birds, on the other hand, are warm-blooded creatures. A better way that the evolutionists basically get into some detailed science and talk about a more specific terminology for basically the essence of warm-blooded versus cold-blooded. They talk about ectothermic and endothermic, okay? Ectothermic means a varying body temperature influenced by the surrounding environment. And then they say endothermic is an internal physiological mechanism used to maintain an essentially constant body temperature. And so when they start kind of splitting hairs, if you will, the evolutionists will claim that the dinosaurs were endothermic in an attempt to get around the warm-blooded versus cold-blooded problem, okay? Well, they were endothermic, but they weren't really specifically cold-blooded. And it really kind of tries to basically trick people into it, especially because there's absolutely no evidence to support what they're saying. It just is something they say. And as people claim, if you say it long enough and loud enough, people will start to believe you. On page 299, it says this. Alan Fiducia, who is an expert on birds and their evolution, has concluded that there has never been, nor is there now, any evidence that dinosaurs were endothermic. He says there's just nothing there to prove it. So there's another problem that they talk about with dinosaurs evolving into birds. And there's apparently dinosaurs are broken into two groups of dinosaurs based on their hips. There's bird-hipped versus lizard-hipped dinosaurs. And again, their dinosaurs are divided into two groups based on this hip bone structure. The lizard-hipped are Saurischians, and the bird-hipped are Ornithischians, okay? So we look at page 299, and it says the main difference between the two hip structures is that the pubic bone of the bird-hipped dinosaurs is directed toward the rear, as it is in birds, rather entirely to the front, as it is in mammals and reptiles. And so once again, they still want to claim that, well, there's some dinosaurs with this type of hip, so it supports their theory that they turned into birds. Another problem or thing they have is the three-fingered hand. Okay, I was like, what in the world is a three-fingered hand? One of the main lines of evidence by evolutionists for the evolution of birds from theropod dinosaurs is the three-fingered hand found in both birds and theropods. Basically, they all have three kind of appendages, a three-fingered hand, right? You look at a lot of birds, you see that on their feet. And the problem is this, okay? There's a digital mismatch between the birds and theropods. When you start breaking it down and looking at the science, there's a mismatch. In both dinosaurs and birds, or reptiles and birds, there's 2 of the 5 fingers are lost during the embryo development, then it leaves just the 3. The problem is this: theropods keep 1, 2, and 3 digits, the first 3 digits, where birds keep the second, third, and fourth digits. Okay, so there's not the same. There's differences there. Then you have issues with the lungs themselves that cause some problems with this idea that dinosaurs have evolved into birds, okay? Birds, one of their most distinctive features is their lungs. They're specifically designed for flight. They're smaller in size and very rigid. They are highly efficient to meet the high metabolic needs of flight. They are what's called unidirectional flow, okay? They only flow in one direction so that they can get more power for flight, okay? On page 300 of your book, it says, bird respiration involves a unique flow-through ventilation into a set of 9 interconnecting flexible air sacs sandwiched between muscles and under the skin. The air sacs contain few blood vessels and do not take part in oxygen exchange, but rather function like bellows to move air through the lungs. The air sacs permit a unidirectional flow of air through the lungs, resulting in higher oxygen content than is possible with the bidirectional airflows through the lungs of reptiles and mammals. And so the reptiles have bidirectional flow, where the airflow moves through the same tubes at different times, both into and out of the lungs, kind of like we do, right? You breathe in, you breathe out, it's all going through the same tubes, where birds is going through one direction only, okay? And so that becomes a problem. They can't, show that there's similarities there. Theropod dinosaur fossils, okay, they have found some of these dinosaurs, and they found with one with the outline of their visceral cavity was completely well preserved, okay? On page 301, it says this: the evidence clearly indicates that this theropod had a lung and respiratory mechanics similar to that of a crocodile and not a bird. So then we want to start talking about, evolutionists want to look at feathers, and they get basically completely wrapped up in finding feathers and say, did feathers exist on dinosaurs? Can we find feathers on dinosaurs? And feathers have truly been considered unique to just birds. No living creature has been found to have anything similar to a feather other than birds. There has been an intense effort, though, to find dinosaur fossils that show some suggestion of feathers or proto-feathers, okay? With such observer bias, one must be skeptical of some recent widely published reports about finding dinosaurs with feathers on them. The dinosaurs are, reptiles, so they shouldn't have feathers. Fossil evidence has shown them to have a scaly skin typical of reptiles. Recent well-preserved specimen of a Compsognathus showed unmistakable evidence of scales and no signs of feathers whatsoever. But evolutionists will claim that there are dinosaurs with feathers. The Sinosauropteryx was from China, and it claimed to be a feathered dinosaur. When you start looking at the evidence, however, though, it is very much an unbird-like dinosaur, with no evidence of structures that could be like feather-like in any way, shape, or form. The other one is they looked at a Sinosauropteryx and a Synthosaurus, and they say that there was proto-feathers on these dinosaurs. Again, as they started to look into detail and look at some of this medically, they found out that it's actually connective tissue fibers and no obvious resemblance to feathers whatsoever. Okay? Thus far, the only obvious dinosaur fossil with obvious feathers that was found is the Archaeoraptor leoninensis. Yeah, I'll say that again, but I won't. This so-called definitive feathered dinosaur was reported with much fanfare in the November 1999 issue of National Geographic, but since has been shown to be a fake or a fraud. So there's no evidence of it at all. They wanted it so much, they basically created one and lied about it, and then that was their best evidence for one. There's some problems for evolutionists, though, okay? If a dinosaur or mammal is ever found with feathers, it would call into question their human criteria for classification, not biblical veracity. What's needed to support evolution is not an unusual mosaic of complete traits, but a trait in transition, such as a scale feather. What creationist biologists would call a seather, okay? If birds evolved from dinosaurs or any other reptile, then the feathers must have evolved from reptilian scales. Evolutionists are so confident that feathers evolved from scales that they often claim that feathers are very similar to scales. Oh, they're very similar. However, once again, let's look at the evidence. Okay? In actual fact, feathers are profoundly different from scales in both their structure and growth. Feathers grow individually from tube-like follicles similar to hair follicles. Reptilian scales, on the other hand, are not individual follicular structures, but rather comprise a continuous sheet on the surface of the body, like your skin. Thus, while feathers grow and are shed individually, scales grow and are shed as an entire sheet of skin. If you want to look at the pictures on page 303 of your book, you can see that, and it's pretty clear. Lastly, one of the problems for evolution is this. There's a Archaeopteryx, okay? And it's a feathered dinosaur, is what they claimed. However, you start looking at it, and it's just a true bird. Okay, it's a true bird. So, having alleged missing links of dinosaurs changing into birds when birds already exist doesn't help the case for evolution, right? Basically, what they're saying is dinosaurs transitioned into birds, but we have a bird with feathers before this transition. So it would certainly cause some problems to their line of thinking. Having a true bird appear before alleged feathered dinosaurs, no mechanism to change scales into feathers, no mechanism to change a reptilian lung into an avian lung, and no legitimate dinosaur found with feathers are all good indications that dinosaurs didn't turn into birds. The evidence is consistent with what the Bible teaches about birds being unique and created after their kinds. Genesis is clear that God didn't make birds from pre-existing dinosaurs. In fact, dinosaurs, land animals made on day 6, came after winged creatures made on day 5, according to the Bible. Both biblically and scientifically, chicken eaters around the world can rest easy that they are not, in fact, eating mutant dinosaurs. Have a good day.